Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Truckee Meadows Water Authority meeting. This is for Wednesday, January 15th, 2025, close to 10 o'clock. And I'm going to ask our clerk to please call the roll.
Anderson?
Here.
Present.
Here.
Hill?
Here.
Taylor?
Here.
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 All right, thank you. And I want to welcome our new members from City of Reno, Miguel Martinez and Kathleen Taylor. Welcome to this, your first meeting, and I'm sure you'll have a great experience on this board. We're also waiting for a new member to be appointed from the City of Sparks, so we're down one, but we're hoping to get that appointment in the next month or so. With that, we will do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to ask Kathleen Taylor to lead us today.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, we'll turn our attention to public comment. And Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment? All right. We'll close out public comment and move on to possible board comments or acknowledgements. And I'm wondering if the board has any comments about anything or our director. No? Okay. And let me ask, did we acknowledge that we have lost some members? Councilmember Breckus, Councilmember DeHare. I don't recall if we've done acknowledgement.
The commissioners that were present at the hearing, it is a switch over for open meeting law.
So are you saying yes or no?
I would have them abstain at this time.
Abstain, okay. All right, that's a new idea. I haven't heard that one before. All right, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion from Ms. Andriola, second from Mr. Anderson. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. And then we're turning our attention to item 7, which is a water supply update. Usually that's Mr. Hawk. Here he is.
All right. Good morning. Bill Houck for the record, and have some good news for you on the water supply front. Despite not having any measurable snowfall in the last week and a half, we're still about normal for this time of year compared to the 30-year median for this day. This bar graph here shows April 1st snowpack over the last 40 years, and the yellow bar, which is snowpack as of Monday morning, we were right at the 30-year median, about 100% of median. This graph from the NRCS is one I like to grab to show you guys. The black line shows water content of the snowpack since the start of the water year from October 1st. And you can see that we are right on top of the green line, which is the 30-year median for this day. And for reference, I also put in 2023, which was our largest snowpack year on record as far as April 1st, and our worst snowpack year on record, which was 2015. Just for reference. So we're right where we need to be, despite not having anything. It's been pretty calm out there. Reservoir storage upstream is in good shape. Lake Tahoe is about 2/3 of capacity. Stampede is about 3/4 full, and all the other reservoirs in the system are basically down to their typical wintertime operating elevation. So overall, system-wide capacity, it's about 2/3 full, which is a good place to be in the middle of winter. It's not. It could be better. Could be certainly, but it's not a bad place to be at all. Runoff hasn't even started yet. Typically, snowmelt runoff doesn't begin till March, preferably April. But the projections, these early projections, are not bad for Lake Tahoe. Showing a 91% of average runoff this year, which means a 1.05 foot rise between April and its high, which is not bad. And the Truckee River natural flow at the California-Nevada state line is a little bit better, close right at at the median, 96% of normal. So runoff projections early on are looking pretty good. And that means this summer the reservoirs basin-wide should be in pretty good shape. Lake Tahoe should be, by the time it's all said and done, based on these early projections, 80 to 85% full by July, which is not bad. Not completely full like we did last year. You can see we were completely full last year and almost full in 2023, but probably right about where we were in 2023, which is not bad either. Projections for runoff at the California-Nevada state line.
Hey,
Looks
Bill,
like
could you pull over, or do you have a mic there? Or
Yeah.
oh,
Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah, so runoff projections for the spring based on January 1st snowpack also looks pretty decent. Not the largest runoff we've ever seen, but all in all, not too bad either. And this is a graph I put together for you. So when I talk in terms of having normal river flows for the year, if you look at the gray line on this graph, these are the required rates of flow at the California-Nevada state line. They're called Florestan rates if you've read our water resource plan. And you can see the projections for the rest of this year. We will have, at a minimum, those flows in the river. And the reason we don't have more is because a lot of that water is being captured and held up upstream for drought storage. So we don't want to let it go. We want to keep it up there. This is a graph showing TMWA's overall system storage, our privately owned water in Donner and Independence Lakes. And this also reflects the water, our drought storage we have in the federally owned and operated reservoirs upstream, Tahoe, Boca, Stampede, and Prosser, under the terms of the Truckee River Operating Agreement. When TROA came into effect in December 2015, we initiated a storage contract with the Bureau of Reclamation to be able to store water, drought storage in all the federal reservoirs upstream. Currently, we only have water in Boca and Stampede, but typically, right now we have about 30,000 acre feet in storage all total, and we'll begin filling again in the spring and bring us up to a little bit over 40, and that's pretty typical for a non-drought year. In a drought year, we would start to build up more storage and carry it over from year to year, just in anticipation that the hydrology is not going to work out for us. So, according to the U.S. Drought Monitor, Nevada and Central California in the Sierras has been abnormally dry for some time. Since end of November, there's been some improvements, primarily in northwestern Nevada, with rain and the storms we've had in December. But in southeastern Nevada, things have actually gotten worse. You can see in red, they are in extreme drought, according to the Drought Monitor right now. But we've been in this, in our region, in the Great Basin and the Sierra Nevadas, we've been in this abnormally dry condition for a while. But like I said, things have improved, despite not having any measurable snowfall in the last week and a half. So on that note, it's been really quiet, and it looks like for the next 10 days, there's nothing on the horizon either in terms of snowfall or precip. I won't sugarcoat this. It's supposed to be snowing this time of year. This is one of our prime snowpack producing months. December, January, and February are big snowpack producing months. It's supposed to be snowing this time of year, and it's not. So every day that it doesn't, we're losing a little bit of ground. If I go back to that graph, this one here, we'll be losing ground. But despite that, we're in a really good situation from a water supply perspective. The reservoirs are 3/4 full. Runoff hasn't even started yet. Winter's not even halfway done. The projections for runoff are decent. And, the snowpack is right where it should be this time of year, despite not having anything. So we will have normal Truckee River flows for the rest of this year, and I would venture to guess well into 2026, despite what happens this winter. So all in all, we're right where we should be in terms of snowpack, and water supply outlook for our region is still pretty good. With that, I'll take questions.
All right, let me ask the board if there's any questions from anyone? No? I'll just have a quick, I was really pleased that you addressed the Florestan rates, but could you just say a few more words just for the benefit of everyone, like what the number's supposed to be and how we've usually done?
For Florestan rates?
At the Farad or at the, you mentioned it earlier? Yeah.
So for today or?
No, in
I guess
general.
I'm not understanding. I'm sorry.
Just in general, the 500.
Yeah, gotcha. So typically, wintertime flows, the required rate is 400 cubic feet per second crossing the state line. And that's from March through September. That's the required rate. And then there's summer flows from, April through September, and the winter flows are October through February. So 400 and 500 cubic feet per second.
So that's something we always look at, right?
Yeah.
To see how we're doing, and it's there's a release to meet those rates, right? From
There is, all the water in Lake Tahoe and Boca reservoirs is to be used to meet that required rate of flow at the California-Nevada state line. So,
and one more thing, why is that important to
Why is
have
it?
this rate? Yeah.
yeah, so that rate was established based on flows that were necessary for pulp and paper milling back at the turn of the century. And it was also a nice rate of flow for the hydropower plants, which were also kind of developed and built at the turn of the century. And Ryan Dixon can talk a little bit more about our hydro plants if you'd like. But yeah, and on top of that, basically all the water rights here in Nevada are basically met. When we know we have Florestan rates or that rate is being met, all the water rights, water right holders are getting their water down here in Nevada.
Yeah. I think the last thing you just said answered my next question, which was about
Split that, and in our peak summer demand months, that's not enough water to meet demand. So that's why TRO is so important to us. When Donner and Independence will release privately owned water and water we have stored under the terms of TROA to augment the natural flows, and so we can get enough water into Chalk Bluff and Glendale.
Okay. And my last question on your presentation was, you said you're feeling worried. We're not snowing, right? It's January.
I'm not worried. I'm just saying, it's supposed to be snowing this time of year.
Yeah.
I'm really not worried because
Okay.
anything can still happen. It's only, we're only in the middle of
Halfway through.
Right. We've seen this before. We've seen it. We've seen, get nothing until March, and then all of a sudden we get two big AR events, and we're back on track, or it puts us over normal. So, and this has been, every year is different. I've done this for a long time, and every year is different.
And AR being atmospheric river.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So any more questions from anyone? All right. Well, thanks again, Bill. Really appreciate always your update.
John wants to put me on the spot.
And John is putting you on the spot. Okay.
I just thought, Chair, if you might indulge me a little bit, Bill, could you talk about the 3-year window that a full Lake Tahoe gives us, just for perspective for new board members on why you can be in good shape even when you're going into a dry year?
So our water supply goes as Lake Tahoe goes. It's kind of the bellwether, canary in the coal mine, so to speak. And when Lake Tahoe's full, we know we have water supply, normal river flows for easily to more than likely 3 years, sometimes more. So with this early projection showing Lake Tahoe being 85% full to coming in the summer, that's really good. That sets us up for at least another 2 years, potentially 3 years. So when natural flow is not enough, water's released from Lake Tahoe and Boca to make that required rate of flow. So we know we'll have enough for the next 2 to 3 years.
And let me ask one more thing, and I guess this is for you, John. I was thinking, for many years, there was a tour of the river, a 2-day tour sponsored by Nevada Water Resource Association, Janet Carson. I just wondered, are those continuing, or have those stopped, or do you know?
I think they are continuing. When Janet was doing it, it was a really good tour. I toured it, a lot of the Tumble folks toured it, but I think they still are doing those.
Yeah. Well, I took it a few times too, and I thought it was a fantastic tour. And so for those board members who haven't, I think it'd be great if you could find out if, when and if it's happening, and make that information available to the board in case anybody'd like to go on it. Anybody serving on this board should have a basic understanding from all the way from Tahoe to Pyramid, where the reservoirs are, what they do, how it works together, what the challenges are, what happens down at Pyramid Lake, the fishery, et cetera. And, it's so good that I've taken it several times, I've spoken on it as well, and every time I learn something new, even when I think I kind of understand, somebody will come up with a new aspect, whether it's about flooding or drought or fish or TROA. These are always important markers to understand. So I think it'd be good for everyone. You got this.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sonia was Johnny on the spot. She has they're May 1st and 2nd this year, and so we can send out the details to the board members.
I think that'd be great. And it's a very low cost generally tour. So, okay, that'd be great. All right, well, we'll close this water supply update out, and we'll turn to a presentation on 8 on the water system pressure standards. And several board members had asked for this over time, and it was really brought to my attention because I guess it was this summer, fall, there were some, we were changing out, meters at that time, or upgrading systems. Maybe you could explain what was happening, but I know that at least one, maybe more, residents had such high water pressure that whatever happened when the system was turned back on, so it was turned off to do these upgrades, when it's turned back on, they had some challenges in their house, with pipes bursting. One person I know had to replace their whole bathroom, and half their house had to be sort of torn up due to water damage. But during that process, we found out that we do have, in all the jurisdictions, some areas of very high pressure. I happen to live in one of them. It's never been a problem. I live in an area that was the county, that is now the city. And because it was county and rural, they had oversized pipes, and the pressure is very high, maybe 120 pounds pressure. But my system can handle it, but not all of the aging systems in our region can, in terms of the houses. And so that's why we asked for this to be put on, but it's a bigger story. Since then, we've had the Davis fire, we've had now experiencing the LA fire, and a lot of the issues have to do with hydrants, water pressure, what are things calibrated for, and so we asked for this presentation to begin to understand how this works in water pressure, both on a day-to-day basis and an emergency basis. So I hand it over to you both. If you'll introduce yourselves and then take us away.
Yeah, thanks for that intro. This is going to be a high level. We could talk all day about the pressure in our system, and I could, but I won't. So I'm Danny Rotter. I'm the Director of Engineering. I have Will Raymond, Director of Operations, Water Quality. And so he'll kind of wrap us up as far as when I give you some engineering speak, he'll tell you what it really means for the real world. So we're going to go through kind of water pressure 101, just so everybody has a basic understanding when we say some of these terms. We'll go through kind of some of our current and historical water pressure standards. We'll talk a little bit about our system redundancy and our requirements, which sometimes the community or the development community can get confused or concerned or don't understand why, and so we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about this new normal that we've seen over the last 5 years, which some of these fires have brought to light as well. So water pressure 101. When you see the tank on the hill, that's your first indication of pressure. It's based primarily on elevation, your relative elevation to that tank. And so if you look at that kind of green dashed line, that's the pressure gradient based on that tank. If you're lower, you have higher pressure. If you're higher to that line, you have lower pressure. We also then, from each of those tanks, can reduce the pressure. And so if you look at that gray line to the right side, that would be through a pressure reducing valve that creates a new lower pressure gradient. And then if you look at those lower houses, they're close to that pressure gradient. So it would be as if there was a tank right next to them, even though it's not being fed directly from a tank. The other thing to kind of give you an idea, picture in your head, is those top areas. When I say pressure zone 1, we have what we call a pressure zone where that tank is providing pressure for that area, and we put a boundary around it and we say that's a pressure zone. So it has its own unique supply, fluctuations, storage volumes, fire requirements, so on and so forth. And so everything kind of to the right there would be pressure zone 2. That's kind of the high level there. So what do we plan for? NAC, Nevada Administrative Code 45A, dictates the minimums across the state that any water system should have. In blue, I've got the TMWA standards. Ours are a bit different, just a little bit. And this is the key to when people say, what should our water pressure be? And the answer is, it depends. Depends on where you're at, depends on time of day, depends on the season, depends on is there a fire or not, so on and so forth. And so when we say max day demand, that's the peak demand in the summer. It's July 15th, everybody's irrigating, it's very hot outside, that's max day. So the average for that 24-hour period in NAC is 40 PSI. TMWA puts a little buffer on that and says, we're going to do 45 PSI because over time, as the system constraints change, demands changes, we want a little safety factor buffer on that.
And PSI being?
Pounds per square inch. Yeah. Peak hour demand. This is the 6 a.m. When people are irrigating, taking showers, or evening time where they're home using dishwashers and laundry machines and so on and so forth. NAC minimum is 30 PSI. TMWA requires 40 PSI when we're planning. The biggest constraint, the things systems are designed for, is max day plus fire. So that dictates the size of the pipes. That's really the design constraint for our system. And so that is 20 PSI. When you have a fire, you're flowing, the system then in that area has 20 PSI. Now, those are minimums. Those are making sure we have enough there. Maximums, unregulated, where right off of a tank, should not exceed 100. And where it is greater than 80, or it's regulated pressure, has the chance to go above that, a customer-owned pressure regulator is required. And this is something where the chair had mentioned, nowadays, probably starting in the 90s, this requirement went into effect with the plumbing code and through TMWA's Sierra Pacific's rules. So you could have a home that's built in the 80s in an area of town that has 120 PSI that doesn't have this. And so what we've been doing is trying to educate. Anytime we have that, is say, hey, new construction is this, your home, and there's also a little confusion out there is we don't have a set date of like 1996, the plumbing code changed and everybody's problems were solved. There's this little ambiguity of when did this happen? When did this occur? So we don't know exactly, but we do know if you've got an older home and you've got higher pressure, we recommend installing one of these, contacting a plumber. So that last point there, legacy system issues, just like we were talking about, some areas have more than 100 PSI. Some have less than 40. In our CIP planning and our water facility planning, we really try to tackle the lower pressure issues. Sometimes we tackle the higher pressure, but mostly we're tackling the lower pressure because that's where, like we said, the max day plus fire is going to have a problem. Not gonna, could. So now let's talk about TMWA's system. When we talk about what we're doing on a daily basis and operations is doing on a daily basis, we've talked about this before, but for the newer members, we have 279 pressure zones. For context, I think Vegas has like 80. So they provide 10, 15 times the water in a 80 pressure zone system. Each of these pressure zones could be served by any combination of 118 pump stations, 97 tanks, 2 distribution reservoirs, 98 wells, and here's the crazy one, 380 pressure regulator stations. And each of those stations has a pressure regulating valve inside of it, which Eric Mothershed and the maintenance crews need to maintain. And if they're not working properly, that's when you could have potential issues. This is a graphic that we actually recently sent out in our newsletter talking about this, saying, hey, it's complicated. If you have higher pressure, contact your plumber. You might need a pressure regulating valve. But just to give you context, water at Lake Tahoe comes from 6,200 down into the valley, is treated, can go back up as high as Mount Rose 3 tank at 6,700, or it can be down out in Sparks at 3,900. So that's 2,700 feet of elevation difference across these 279 pressure zones. And so it can be a challenge at times when you have things like fires and outages, power outages to make all that happen. This is a snapshot of just one area of the system. This is in the lower right, that's McQueen, in kind of the Northgate area. And what we've been learning over the past 15, 20 years is we need to really have a redundant supply. We need to have a minimum of 2 sources of supply per zone. So if one is out for maintenance, like you might have heard in the LA fire, or recoating a tank or a pump station down for maintenance or a power outage, that we can continue to supply water. We also require looping. We don't allow tree systems. And this is basically where you just get smaller and smaller and smaller pipes as you go down a hill, and you take one main break and take out 250 homes, and all of a sudden you have no fire and no fire support. So this one is a big one that comes up a lot when you talk about new areas of development where they're out at the end of a system and we require 2 sources of supply and looping. Well, that does mean additional cost, but it also means later that you have the supply and the reliability that TUM was known for. So we have a new normal. In 2019, we coordinated with MV Energy, and they informed us that they have a paradigm shift where they are doing these PSOMs, Public Safety Outage Management. And so that website's there for those that aren't aware, and some maps. Basically, each of those green areas cover an area of TMWA that they said, hey, we could have a potential situation in the fall where we have dry fuels, we have high winds, and we're going to shut these down preventatively, and we'll be out of power for 2 days, kind of waiting for the storm to pass before a fire even starts. So go ahead and start preparing yourselves. And so what we've done since 2019, we'll talk about it a little bit too, is started to really look at where did we used to rely on power all the time and not have a generator, and started to think about these things. And so we've been doing these planning scenarios, working with emergency management, Ian, for what happens if all these go down at the same time or one of them goes down. And so we've really been looking at placing generators, adding costs, look in the CIP, we've had some line items to spend some money to do all that. Then in 2024, along those same lines, MV Energy built out their system further, or their planning.
It's coming over the hill and what the projections are. If we have lightning, thunder, we're getting the system full and fat everywhere. It's similar to how we handle active fires. We get a phone call, we see a pressure drop in the system. Usually we can pretty much tell what the pressure is any given neighborhood at any time because we have that telemetry going up the hill, similar to what Danny was talking about, from a booster pump station to a reg station as you're moving water. We know what the pressure should be. So many times the operators will see that pressure drop before we get a phone call of a main break, and we're already rolling the distribution crews out there to go find it and repair it. But what that means is this is a new dynamic that we are working very closely with our partner agencies, the local fire departments, the power company. We have this dialogue and discussion about how do we get better, how do we help improve our planning and our footprint so that we're ready for that next thing. LA is very much in the news right now. It's hard to plan for a natural disaster, but what it also does mean is it puts the onus on us to be responsive, to get every tank full in anticipation. We're going on the assumption if we lose power, we're in the best possible condition to fight fire for as long as we can. That buys us time to roll our stage generators that we have strategically located around town, but also some of it are more centrally facilities like Chalk Bluff and Glendale. And that gets us time to get out there, install it, connect it, fire it up, take it off grid power, put it on generator power. So now we're online and not dependent on if the power. These are all conditions that we plan. But really, similar to what Danny was talking about before, it's moving water and situating us in the best possible state. Every situation is different. How we handled, and I see in the West Reno fire, I forgot what that one was officially named.
Holland or Pine Haven?
Yeah, I remember the one in Boomtown, but then you have the Davis fire. They're all different, so the response is different for each one. It depends on where are the critical infrastructure, and that's part of that communication that we're working with the power company to say, you give us as much lead time as possible when you can, but we're not dependent on them. We have eyes and ears. We read the news. We see the weather. We'll start pre-positioning as best we can.
But are you, a question I have is, are you getting calls or communication from MV Energy when they're going to do these proactive power outages like we saw in the Davis fire? That was affecting a lot of people, and I know it affected us at TMWA because of the generator issue. Are we getting calls, or you're saying we're independent?
Oh, we're certainly not independent. We're very reliant upon the power company. But what that also means is we have good pathways of communication, especially during the Davis fire. Through our emergency management program, we have now stood up, that's the right word to phrase it, we have those local pathways. But we also have our major accounts representative that we can work through. We have our other connections that we can make phone calls. But I'd say we also realize, trust me, I think everybody had the same reaction you did. Only on the assumption that that is the worst case. And I don't know all the terminology they use, but I remember it's something like a particularly dangerous situation or something like that. So when they're saying if that emerges and it does that 6 miles, we were already mapping out on our plots that our GIS department puts together. And we have push pins and things like that we're putting. Generator A is at this location and B, so we can hold the line the best we can. Worst case scenario, you're exactly right. That's a big area affected.
Yeah, it's huge.
But we've got that presence in the incident command system, and our fire and emergency management, NV Energy is there, the counties, the cities.
Well, tying this back to the water pressure situation, one of the things a lot of people have asked me in the last week is, are we at risk with the situation they had in LA where the fire hydrants, or they quote, ran out of water? What's our story related to that scenario?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's on everybody's minds. Danny Rauter, for the record, the key thing to note is that the size of that fire and the response needed was far and away beyond anything any public water system is designed for. We don't know all the details. And that's part of the thing, is trying to see the details to learn from them. We're a little premature, but we have had those conversations and coordinating with, your fire departments and saying, hey, we are continuing to have these discussions. Are we on the right track? Let's make sure we follow up and talk with, this person and have another, debrief. We had a debrief on the Davis fire, for instance, and learned some things with MV Energy and fire. So, for kind of anybody watching, public water systems aren't designed to fight 20,000 acre wildfires. We plan for structure fires that our fire department can handle. And there's just a limitation there that is going to be anywhere you are. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. I've read a few articles, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more analysis of what happened there. And is it even affordable to be able to even scale up a little larger? But let me stop asking questions. Let me see if there's questions from other board members here. Anyone? Kathleen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. As a new board member, I just want to make sure that you have all the resources that you need to be prepared. So that is my first question. I heard you mention some generators. Are there things that we need to be doing or providing to you to make sure that we're in that position for our community?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, good thought. Since 2019, we've budgeted for seasonal leases on trailer mount generators to handle some of that PSOM stuff. And then we've been starting to put in our CIP and other stuff to actually purchase some of those, have them on hand, and then expand our permanent generator installs as well. The other thing, our last water facility plan, we kind of revised some of our design criteria to make sure that, hey, if you're going to be in one of these PSOM zones and you need a pump station to serve your upper development, wherever it may be, that's going to require a generator, and it's going to require our redundancy requirements. That's the biggest pushback I get is when they say, hey, we're building 200 homes up on the edge of this system. And we say, well, you need a pump station and 2 tanks or 2 pump stations and they both need generators. And they go, that's really costly. And we're like, yeah, I know, but that's the new normal. So hopefully that gives you a high level. I think we're good.
I would only add, Will Raymond, similar to what the board can do to help, it's a big thank you to this board and the previous boards. You've helped us add staff, and similar to what Danny was talking about, these reg stations and things like, this is the staffing component in succession planning, because every new water facility that goes in, it has an inspector that has to make sure it's installed according to code. You have the operators who are going to operate the system as it's designed. You have the maintenance staff that's going out there to maintain these reg stations and facilities. And when things do break, you have the distribution crews that are going out there repairing leaks at 1 a.m. in the freezing cold. I thank you all for helping us set up that succession planning as we get more skilled individuals in to help maintain that redundancy. So that's my take on it, in addition to Danny's.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Comment and then a couple of questions for you guys. First, I want to say thank you for the presentation. Great job. You covered a lot of ground in a short time. And then secondly, I want to say thank you for publicly talking about the redundancy and not having the trees and things like that. Because when I first came on as a council member and I had developers complaining about that and saying, look, it's increasing the house cost by as much as $7,000 per home. And here we are trying to fight affordable housing. But when you explain it like you did, and now you've got Los Angeles that you can go, look, isn't redundancy even more important? If you have the resource of having the water and potentially you're shutting down that tree, what worse situation could you put a community in? So I appreciate you explaining that part of it to us, because that was something that, coming and meeting with you guys and a developer going, why? I appreciate your explanations. And then I had a question, Danny, you mentioned the education process of the public. So other than the newsletter, what other steps are we taking to educate people on the pressurized system and how to be cautious and mindful of that?
Yeah, I guess 2 ways we do that. One, for existing customers, we get a lot of phone calls saying, hey, can't you just turn down my pressure, or can't you turn up my pressure? And so we try and educate that way. We also have a process for pressure complaints. So, if one person starts at the call center and gets that basic information, but then maybe that doesn't answer their question or whatever, they think they're having something unique happen, then we'll have a whole pressure complaint process where we're looking at our SCADA system and, hey, have we seen some unique trends here? Oh, there is something when that pump station comes on, there's a little spike. Maybe we should look at that, and we fine tune some things. So that's kind of the existing customer way to go through it, is kind of that initial call pressure complaint process where we can kind of maneuver from there. And then on the developer side, we have our process called a discovery, which is kind of a non-binding early document and help with kind of due diligence as far as what's going to be required. Those trigger a lot of the conversations around, 2 pump stations and 2 tanks. How are we what are we gonna? But it starts the conversation. It starts the education process. So I can take a heated phone call and say, hey, I understand. It's not like I just teed this up for fun, but here's what maybe we could do it in phased, or maybe we can, and that usually there's a lot of back and forth after that initial discovery before the final product, comes to light. That answers your question. Okay.
I guess just adding to that and looking to our communications team, is it possible that maybe we do some releases, proactive reaching out? And I would even ask maybe reaching out to Sparks on our communications team, Reno, Washoe County, and so that we're going to the community with a message of here's a system, here's how it works, and more proactive engagement with the public to see if we can prevent some of these. And I've only heard of a few. One of them was actually a family member in Southwest Reno that, had their pipe rupture and, have some issues. So it'd be nice if nothing else, if we could kind of talk through it and help the people better understand it. And then the second question I had was, when it comes to these regional emergency type situations, Davis Fire is a perfect one. Is TMWA involved at the emergency center? Do we actually have representation there?
Yeah, we actually do. It would kind of depend. We might have maybe an operation. Maybe you want to take it, but I'm
To
not over my skis.
To Danny's point, essentially, when these things pop up, a large regional EOC activation, certainly our emergency management group and Ian Dassman, I think he presented at last month's board meeting, we have that presence, and we would make sure we want to have somebody at the EOC because we rely on that person to bring it back to TMWA and how that's going to affect our response and operations. But in the same vein, when we stand up our EOC at TMWA, we get all of our appropriate people, and Ian will go into these different levels and depths of incident command systems and modules, and that's where the information filters down. We have those communication portals to who are we calling at Reno, Washoe, Sparks, and then you have the local fire agencies. But we're also involved in those on-site, I think, daily tactical planning messages so that we're hearing from the NV Energy and the fire incident commanders, and that's what comes back. So we absolutely have those mechanisms in place thanks to our good emergency management folks.
Good to know. Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Wanted to pivot off something that Mr. Anderson said, and that was about the education. And something I had been thinking about prior to this meeting was, isn't May the Water Education Month or Water Month? Is that right? Is it May?
May is also National Drinking Water Week.
Drinking Water Week. And then is it
Smart About Water Day.
What is it?
Are you talking about Smart About Water Day?
That, or I thought we had a month for water.
Yes.
Is that, some of our people in communications, does anyone know? Isn't there
I
a
do
big,
know every May is National Drinking Water Week.
Right.
And to Danny's point, that's when we plan our Smart About Water
Right.
community
right.
dealy bob.
So I was wondering this time, perhaps we could do a module on pressure issues and even provide an opportunity. I think you guys have giveaways or whatever. Maybe one of those giveaways at request might be one of these $10 pressure meter or pressure checker items. Just to get the knowledge out there. And it's not that you would send them out, it's that it would be on request or something. I'm not suggesting, millions of these or thousands of these go out, but it would be a good thing to help raise awareness that this is an important component of your water at your house. And it's up to you to sort of figure out what's going on, but we want to help. So I'm just planting a seed for, one of the modules during that time. I know we usually focus on water conservation. Mostly. It's the beginning of irrigation season. So would you consider that something?
Yeah, for sure. I've been at Smart About Water Day talking about pressure zones for a while, but we can add in that additional piece, educational piece, for what the customer aspect.
Their side.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions from anyone? No other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you so much. You really answered a lot. I think that at some future time, I know that our community is going to keep talking about fire, and I've even heard some public sessions are being planned as soon as February. So it might be good to be prepared to talk about hydrants and hydrant pressure and how we operate in different forums, not just here at TMWA, but more on the speaking trail. Something to think about as well, because I think there's going to be, I've already gotten, I don't know about the other electeds, but I've gotten a question or comment almost every single day, about how are we situated? Can we have assurance about evacuation routes? What about our fire hydrants? There's a lot of anxiety in our community, and I think we should put that to good use, since it's just like when there's a drought or a flood, people are thinking about that. Well, there's a fire right now, and so I think it's an opportunity to educate about the issues that you're dealing with, and more, in more detail than high level. Like you showed the charts, and I was glad you brought up about the developer piece, because I too, over my 10 years, have gotten a lot of pushback about the cost of development and why does TMWA require all these things. And as a water person myself, I've explained, you got to have these loops, in the water system for redundancy, but it costs. So, all right, well, we will close out this item. Thank you so much, both of you, for this very good information. And we're going to turn our attention to item 9, which is about the 2024 interim legislative session. And I think we're going to get both an update and also appoint our board members to our legislative subcommittee.
Morning, everybody. Dan Newbell, staff attorney at TMWA for the record. I just wanted to provide you initially with an update on how TMWA is going to be tracking some of the legislative bills that are coming forward in the 2025 session, and then also ask for action on establishing the subcommittee for reviewing legislative bills, as has been the practice of the TMWA board in past years, and also appointment of board members to that subcommittee. So the 2025 legislative session starts in just a few weeks, right around the corner. There are currently a total of 982 bill draft requests that are available. And actual text has been made available for 247 bills. We are currently in the process of reviewing each of those bills. At the moment, we're tracking 123 BDRs that we think might have some kind of impact on TMWA, or at least worth following along. And also, of the bills that I've read so far, 73 of those bills have potential, some more than others, to have some kind of impact on TMWA. And so we've set those to track. There's going to be more to read through. And then once we've done that initial read through, we're going to send it over to our subject matter experts for each of those fields at TMWA to get their thoughts, and essentially compile our internal deliberations on those bills. At that point, we will have the legislative subcommittee that will meet, it seems like generally about every 3 weeks or so at a standing time. And we'll kind of do more of a deep dive into some of those bills that we think there'll be a TMWA impact on. We'll deliberate on, what those impacts might be. And then that subcommittee can make recommendations to the TMWA board as a whole, where you all can decide whether we want to formally oppose a bill, support a bill, or in most cases, I think we would just track a bill and remain neutral on it. Of those bills that have been released so far, and I've read through, they touch on a lot of things: public records, open meeting law, water rights, and public contracting, and as well as other issues. So there's going to be a pretty wide array of bills with potential impact on TMWA. So I think for the action item here and the establishment of the subcommittee, we are hoping to ideally have a member from each jurisdiction as part of the 3-person subcommittee, and then also at least one alternate, ideally more, I think, as well, but at least one alternate is what we're hoping for. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions about it that you all might have.
So just real quick, of those bills that you're tracking, 123 BDRs, 73 impact on TMWA, of those, how many might directly deal with water, versus the administrative issues?
I'd say most do not deal with water. Most are, because we're a public entity, there's so many bills that relate to open meeting law, public records, contracting, and many other facets of it. The actual water-related bills of the text that's been released, I think there was maybe 3 or 4 that were. So the wide majority do not deal with that, but there are some bills that deal with water rights and whatnot. And so we do have outside counsel as well, Steph Morris, who helps us to analyze those, Gordon DePoli. And so we have a lot of resources for that, but there are a few bills that deal with water.
Yeah. Now, it seems to me in past years, there's been about 10 per session, when it's all said and done, that end up going to natural resources or something. Is that?
Yep.
I don't know if that's been your.
Yeah, and I think, based on the BDRs we've seen, we expect more actual text water bills to be made available.
And they're usually pretty controversial.
Yeah.
Almost every one of them, because they're talking about changing water law or changing people's perception of their rights. And, that's kind of very important in the driest state, right?
Right. No, there's a lot of passion on those subjects, and I've observed the same.
Yeah. Okay. And then do you have a list, or I know we have a list of who's on our committees today?
I believe that would be Sonia. Do you have a list of the current subcommittee makeup. Sorry.
I have it in my head, but
Yes, Sonia Folsom for the record. We have Councilmember Dewar and then Councilmember Anderson and Commissioner Hill as our representatives on the legislative.
and then we often meet in conjunction with the Western Regional Water Commission also has a committee. And we've also have a joint meeting. And I think that we have the same representatives over on Western Regional Water Commission. So there's just three of us. It's the same three. We meet together. We've established different chairs. And then we have the alternate. Okay. So how would you like us to proceed?
I think that next step would be essentially an action item or motion from someone establishing the legislative subcommittee for the 2025 legislative session, and then also appointing members to be on that subcommittee.
All right, well, let me start with those that are on now. As far as myself, I happen to be chair of this board and also Western Regional, and so, and have probably at this point the longest serving member on this board, so I would like to stay on the legislative committee. It's something really important to me. Over in Sparks, we have Mr. Anderson on there, and do you want to speak to your potential?
Well, two things. One, I'm actually the only representative from Sparks at the moment. We were getting ready in a couple of weeks to pick one, but for now, I'm the only representative. So, and I've been on that, both water, Western Regional Water as well as TMWA, and I'd like to remain on them as well.
Yeah. And then we have Alexis Hill. She's not here today. I don't know if our staff have heard from her or.
May I speak to that?
Well, of course, I'm coming right to you next, but I just wanted to find out if Alexis had opined or had interest. Okay.
I obviously don't want to speak for Washoe County Chair Hill, but my understanding is that there's no indication that she would want to go off it. So in other words, she would like to stay on it. I, again, don't want to be speaking for her in case she had a last minute change, but I have no understanding that she wants to get off it.
Okay.
Yep. And your counsel can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think in future board meetings, if there was any reason to change the membership, this board could do a vote to essentially change the membership or composition of that committee if so desired.
Absolutely.
But I do have a question in terms of the alternate. Who is the alternate?
Well, it had been Ms. Breckus, as I recall.
I see.
So we definitely need a new alternate. And the alternate does come into play because, you know, we meet pretty frequently and it's only three. And so if one person can't make it, you know, we're potentially don't have a quorum. So there's only three of us. So
I wouldn't mind being the alternate unless someone else would like that. I don't want to take up that slot if there's another interest, but I am pretty involved in the legislative process. I'm not suggesting I'm a water expert.
Good.
Maybe.
Well, great.
So I don't mind.
Yeah. And then it looks like Sonia's signaling me that she'd like two alternates.
Okay.
Okay. Would either of our other Reno folks be interested in being an alternate on that board? You whispered, sure.
A confident.
Okay. All right. So given what people have said, could I get a motion to the effect what we just heard?
So I'll move to form the legislative committee, and the members would be Chair Dewar, Member Anderson, Member Hill, and the alternates being myself and Member Taylor.
And it may get a second on that. Okay, Ms. Taylor was the second. All right. Is there any further conversation on this? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Good job. Thanks for the update. I think it's important too to say we have an advisor on there, I think, right? We have a lobbyist.
We do, yes. Government Affairs Coordinator Leo Drozdoff.
Okay, and you didn't expect him to be here, but will he be here maybe at future meetings?
I would expect so, yeah. He always keeps updated with this.
Okay. So just to let everyone know, we do have a lobbyist representing us down at the legislature, Leo Drozdoff. He's a former director of the Nevada Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. And prior to that, he had several other jobs at the state. So he's a good one, to have on our team. Is there any discussion about keeping him or replacing him? Do we have to do a contract on him?
No, he's established.
Okay, very good. All right, well, excellent. We'll just close out this item. Thank you so much for leading us through this one. Okay?
Yep, and I'm here for the next one too.
Oh, okay. So let's open up item 10, public hearing on rule amendments. Right back at you.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. For this one, staff submits for the board's consideration for first reading, the attached red line within the materials provided to you of the authority's water rules, numbers 5, 6, 8, and 10. The rules apply to water service supplied by TMWA to its customers and require approval by TMWA's board. Staff requests that the board refer the changes to a second reading at the next TMWA board meeting. These proposed changes to the rules are intended to streamline and in some cases modernize the rules to deal with new issues that have arisen since the rules were first adopted. On June 20th, 2024, I presented to the board an informational update that laid out generally, without providing a red line, of the bigger picture of what the rule updates would look like. On October 29th, 2024, staff held a public workshop at our corporate office to allow members of the public an opportunity to dialogue with staff about these proposed changes. We established essentially a station-by-station model for the room where if a member of the public came, they would have a subject matter expert to talk to about Rule 5, Rule 6, Rule 8, and Rule 10. We had 3 members of the public attend and 1 member of the Standing Advisory Committee that came as well. From the 3 members of the public, we had a representative of the Commercial Real Estate Development Association, Trey Abney, so we appreciated him coming by. And then we also had 2 young engineers come by that were just curious about the rules and wanted to learn more. We gave the opportunity for anyone that wanted to submit some written comment to us as well online so that we could dialogue with them if they had any concerns or questions about the changes that we were making. Nobody ended up submitting any written comment, and so we have not received any comment from anyone related to these rule changes. I can go, I guess, briefly over each rule and talk about what those generally impact, and then we can dive into any questions that you guys have.
I really think we should do that. Many people don't know what a Rule 8 is or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think it's important.
Cool. Yeah. I'll run through real quick and just give a little overview for each rule that we are amending here. So Rule 5 applies primarily to developers of land or builders of projects that require new or modified water system facilities. This rule also specifies the application process and responsibilities of applicants and TMWA for the water system facilities and associated costs. Rule 6 describes the application process, cost, and installation responsibilities and the requirements for installing service and meter facilities for any new or modified service. That rule is used primarily for developers and builders of projects who have to connect to TMWA's distribution facilities in order to receive water service. Rule 8 is our dispute resolution rule. Disputes under Rule 8 apply in the case of disputes regarding the application of any provision of the TMWA rules. And Rule 10 sets forth our special conditions and programs that apply to water service or circumstances arising out of water service. I think primarily here the important part is the changes to the Mount Rose Galena domestic well mitigation program. So that's kind of a broad overview of what those 4 rules are about. And then there's a series of red lines that we provide to you that will show the actual changes. Those red lines, just so you all know, were also included at our public workshop that we did. We provided them online beforehand for anyone to review. And then also we had them on hand at the meeting to kind of go through the nitty-gritty of what the changes were and kind of talk with folks about it. So any questions?
Yeah, let me ask you, Mr. Nibble. It seemed like Rule 6 had the most change.
Yes, and I just had a thought here. I think for the agenda, we were supposed to do a public comment potentially at the beginning.
And do we have to open a public hearing? also? We do that at Reno, but I don't know if that's a formal step. Can you advise us, Justina?
We will take public comment before you vote, and then you have to do it again after you vote on this item.
Okay.
Yep.
So should we truncate you at this point and open public comment?
That's
Okay.
fine.
Tony, is there any public comment registered on item 10A? Any hands on the Zoom? Okay. Well, we'll close out the first public comment. So I'm going to go back to your presentation.
Yep.
And what, in terms of, Mr. Newble, in terms of item 6, Rule 6, there's a lot of red line. And I wondered what prompted all of that. A lot of it's about fire. There's, there was a lot of change too over on, let me see, over on the complaints before a hearing officer, so the hearing officer process.
Right, and so that one is actually Rule 8. I don't think we had the identifier above. And so you might look like those changes are included in Rule 6, but that's actually Rule 8, but the heading is missing.
It does say
so-
Rule 6 on
Yeah.
the previous page.
Right, and so the dispute resolution in front of the board, that's all Rule 8 stuff.
Yeah.
So Rule 6 is the fire facilities changes, and the red line might look significant. I will say that the purpose of the change, for the most part, is that we had provisions dealing with fire facilities located throughout Rule 6, but they weren't all together. And so if someone were to read through it and wonder, well, how do you handle fire facilities? It's kind of, it was
You couldn't
scattered.
find it.
You couldn't really find it. It was scattered throughout the rule. And so what we did was strike those changes, or strike those lines that we have throughout the rule dealing with fire facilities here and there, and instead build an entire section to that rule that incorporates what was already contained
Okay.
within those previous
So do
sections.
you know of changes, other substantive changes besides getting it all together?
There are some substantive changes throughout Rule 6, but for the most part, it was a formatting and kind of putting it all together for someone to be able to read through and understand, I guess, how we handle those facilities.
Well, it is hard to know what's new since you've moved the section. So I don't know if any, I mean, fires of interest to all of us. Are any of these substantive in terms of change of a procedure or what we're expecting from developers to address fire or?
Danny Rotter, for the record, thought I would jump in here and point out a couple that I'm aware of. One is on kind of the second page of almost all red. Towards the end, item 8 starts all fire services with private booster pumps shall be designed, so on and so forth. There's some language in there about water waste and efficient use of these private fire pumps, generally is what we're talking about. We've had a couple instances where a facility can't meet fire flow from the system, and so they have to put in their own pump system to service their sprinklers or whatever. We've had a couple instances where we've noticed, through the operators, hey, there's a drop in pressure happening in, I'll give you an example, the Home Depot off of Clear Acre, McCarran area. Finally get a hold of the fire testing agency and say, hey, what are you guys doing here? And they're like, well, we're running a full fire flow test once a week. And they're just dumping water, wasting water. And it's like, well, can you back that off? You're wasting water. Could you do it? Is there a different way you could do it? And kind of got one of those, yeah, we'll think, figure that out later. And kind of not looking at our rules going, how do we stop this? This is crazy. We eventually got there. But there's been a couple of those that have driven that change to say, if it's detrimental, wasteful, those types of things.
Okay.
To identify
So in the fire case, I mean, are you going to have them recapture this water in some way, even if it goes into the secondary treatment, not pure water, but use it for something else?
So most of them can test in the loop internally and not discharge. It's very minor where they would be discharging. This is the one I can think of off the top of my head that is like that.
Okay, but do you think they're going to change their practice after this?
New ones will, for sure.
Okay.
And then those that we have, I believe, I'm looking at Andy, thinking of that one off Home Depot. Did they change their practice? Sure. I haven't heard about it in a while. I think they
Okay.
modified their practice with our encouragement.
Okay, well, probably something I'm glad you guys are all over this.
Yeah.
And then what about anything in this, there's a lot of red in 8.
Yes.
And when you bring it back for the final second reading, maybe you guys could put a header, because it's at the bottom, and the page numbers, but it's not in the header. Is
I
there
can fix that.
something big? It looks like the hearing officer complaints are changing.
Yeah, so I guess speaking to Rule 8, there's been cases that have gone in front of this board in recent years. And so when I started at TMWA about a year and a half ago, that had already taken place. But in speaking with our outside counsel that handled that process and other attorneys that have worked through that process, there were opportunities to kind of streamline these rules and provide for a more clear process with the hearing officer beforehand, with briefing, putting potentially page limits and ordering the briefs so that instead of both sides submitting briefs on the same day that just kind of talk sideways of each other rather than addressing points that the other would make. Now we're going to set it up where the petitioner of a complaint would file their complaint and then have a brief that talks about what their problem is. And then TMWA would have the opportunity to respond to that. And then the hearing officer could request additional briefing if there was any issues they thought were worth discussing further. But essentially providing a little bit more structure and, kind of piggybacking off of some of the other administrative rules for hearing processes across the state to build that in. Identification of witnesses was one we put in, where letting the other side know, here's who we're going to be calling, so that each side has the opportunity to prepare for that. So I would say most of the changes were just trying to bring structure, a little bit more structure to
Well,
the
I'm really
process.
glad to hear it. I mean, we experienced at this board, we had to act as an appeal body and basically ratify the decisions that were being made. And there seemed to be a lot of presentation of the same material over and over. And to your point, instead of people addressing the issues that one or other party brought up, they just kept saying the same thing. No, we don't want to do it, or whatever. And so I'm glad to hear it. I think it's good. Did I cut you off? Was there something more? Or-
No,
Okay.
that's kind of the big picture of Rule
Okay.
8. If you have any specific red line questions, I can go through those. But
Okay, no, I thought we should all understand exactly what you guys are doing, because it's hard when you consolidate sections and there's a different way to do this, not just red line, but you can also highlight things that are either new within a new red line so that we actually could see that. Do you know what I mean? Like when it's presented on the page, it's both underlined and,
Strikeout and red line.
well, they have that, but if you're adding something new, it should probably be highlighted in yellow as well, so we know that's a new thing,
okay.
not just a thing that's brought forward.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. Any other comments, questions on these proposed changes? Anyone? Nothing? Okay. And so we need to, you said after we actually vote? There's public
Yes, there's
comment.
2 public comments with the rules, so one before and one after, so
Okay.
you'll have to do the motion.
All right. Well, I'm looking for a motion to introduce the first reading of these amendments.
Move to refer the proposed rule amendments to second reading.
And the second reading would be the next meeting? Okay. And is there a second? And, okay, so we have a motion from Member Anderson and a second from Member Martinez. Any further comment? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion is carried unanimously. And then for final public comment, is there any final public comment on what we've just done? Okay. All right, well, with that, I will close the public hearing.
Thank you all.
And turn back to the regular agenda. And we're on item 11, and this is an update on the Truckee River Fund activities. And given our new board members, perhaps Sonia and Cara, you could just explain what the Truckee River Fund is and the percent. I think it's the 1.5% and how much money we get and so on.
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning, Board. Sonia Folsom for the record. This is basically a high-level overview of what transpired in 2024, the Truckee River. For new board members and a refresher for current members, the Truckee River Fund was established in 2004 with the intent of supporting water quality and watershed projects that TMWA cannot pursue on its own due to funding. Since inception, it has evolved into an important component of TMWA's overall water source water protection program. And over the years, the advisory committee has developed a prudent and rigorous approach to the evaluation of proposals to ensure those that are recommended to you for final approval are tangible and have measurable outcomes that meet the objective of the fund, which are outlined in your staff report. The Community Foundation of Northern Nevada manages the program on behalf of TMWA. Lauren Renda is the program manager, and she is the direct contact with the advisory committee. The advisory committee is made up of 9 members that represent the 3 agencies, City of Reno, City of Sparks, and Washoe County. Those are appointed by your boards and commissions, and they are citizens, constituents of your jurisdictions. Last year, the summary now, since 2004, 223 projects were approved by TMWA, and the funding amount for those were $17 million. The total match from grantees, which is a requirement for the projects approved, totaled almost $27 million. In 2024, the fund expenses were almost $950,000. Administration fees were almost $24,000. The funding available for the spring 2025 RFP cycle, which is open right now, is $310,800. The administrative fees that Chair Dewar mentioned, that is part of the agreement and the Community Foundation's overall general administrative fees that they charge. So that's what the $23,976 it was for. They meant to manage the program and administer the funds. Each recipient of the funds is required to provide reports on their project status, successes, metrics, and completion. And if any funds are left over, they are returned back to the fund. And with that, I will answer any questions if they are technical. Ms. Steeland is here to help me.
Well, Ms. Folsom, I was hoping that you could also address how the money is generated for the fund.
Thank you. So TMWA provides funds to the Community Foundation to disperse to the program. Every fiscal year, it is part of the budget process. It is a line item, and the CFO, Mr. Bowman, and Mr. Zimmerman and team decide. They have a discussion, and it's usually $800,000. Initially, it was $1 million. In a few years back in the day, they took some of that money out to provide for cloud seeding at DRI. We have stopped doing that for the last few years, and it has fluctuated between $850, $800, $750 every fiscal year. And those funds are dispersed twice a year. Fall cycle in September. The Truckee River Fund has a meeting in August to approve and recommend those projects, and then it comes to the board in September. And then again, now in the spring cycle, it is open. It'll end. It'll close at the end of January, and then typically the fund advisory committee meets in February to review those RFPs. This year, unfortunately, it's not going to be in February. It's going to be the first week of March due to scheduling conflict, but it will come to you, the board, in March.
I thought there was a 1.5% from each bill that went into this fund, and maybe I might be misunderstanding.
So that's the regional water management fee that
Oh,
goes
that's
to
the
Western Regional Water
to go to
Commission.
Western Regional Water Commission. But this one is, I'll call it arbitrary, at the discretion, and you guys recommend a certain amount in the budget process. And let me ask, so if we take 310, and if you had another 310, that would only be about 620, not 800. So are you?
So the 310,000 and change is what is left over after the fall cycle was approved. And this is the remaining. And if in the next Fund Advisory Committee meeting, they review those RFPs, however many there are, and approve those projects for funding. If there's any amount left, that will carry over to FY26.
Okay.
And
So
then
how much is sitting in there now?
That's it.
The 310?
Yes.
Okay. And we were originally budgeted for about 800?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And as I recall, you don't have limitations on how many grants you can award, or is there a maximum amount?
The funding dictates how much is
The request, you mean, or the,
the amount that is in the fund, yes.
okay. So you could have 4 large projects of 200,000 apiece, or you could have many smaller projects?
Correct.
Okay.
And in the staff report, I have included all the projects that were approved for recommendation and
The fall.
their amounts, yes, for both spring of 25 and fall of 25. 24, sorry, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions on this or interest? Yes, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. So am I understanding there's 300,000-ish in this fund?
Yes.
And applications are going to be open or RFP process until the end of January. So if City of Reno is interested in working or putting forth a project, how logistically, tactically do they do that?
So Ms. Renda at the Community Foundation has an email list, very generous email list that she emails that group, telling them that the RFP cycle is open and City of Reno is included in that list. Members and staff from City of Reno.
And then you said there's a match, so if City of Reno applies for $100,000 from the fund, then they need to come up with another $100,000?
25%.
25%?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I had a question. Were the River Rangers, did that come up last time?
No, it did not.
This is a program that the City of Reno is participating with many other agencies. For example, the Flood Project and other, Washoe County itself, are providing funding for River Rangers that go up and down the river to make sure that the river's being protected in a variety of ways, whether it's trash or things being blocking the river or those kind of issues. And I didn't know if Reno had applied for participation in that program.
Cara Steeland, for the record, City of Reno did not apply for the River Rangers program. A River Stewards program through the Reno Initiative for Shelter and Equality was approved.
Right,
in
I'm
fiscal
familiar
year,
with that one.
but not the River Rangers.
Okay, is that something back at Reno we may want to talk about? I know Member Martinez and I have been very involved in helping get funding for this program one way or the other. So, okay, they're called, the River Rangers. So, any other questions, comments? All right, seeing none. Now, do we actually need a motion on this one?
No.
Okay, just for information and
Yes.
get
you
us
will-
prepared for March.
Correct.
And also back at our home jurisdictions, if there's interest to apply.
Yes, it closes January 30th.
Right. Okay.
And if anybody has any questions, they can contact me.
Okay, very cool. All right, thank you so much. We're going to close out item 11, turn to 12. 12 is about appointment of a trustee to the Western Regional Water Commission. Is this, Sonia, you too? Will you just remind us all why there's one name on the list, not 7, and how the appointment process works?
Sonia Folsom for the record again. There's only one name, Member Taylor, because the TMWA board is required by the NRS 25.3 to appoint 3 members from the TMWA board representing both 3 jurisdictions, Washoe County, City of Sparks, and City of Reno, for 2 years, beginning April 1st to March 31st. We are requesting that Member Breckus's position be filled by Member Taylor, as she is the only member on the TMWA board who is representing Reno and not already on the Western Regional Water Commission, which Chair Dewar and Member Martinez are. Thank you very much. Yes, and that's why there's only one. If either one of you were not already on Western Regional, there would be two names there.
And as I recall, I think I've been appointed by the city. I think
Yes.
that Member Martinez has been appointed by the wastewater, is that right?
Yes, the trustees are on the back of the page of your staff report.
Right.
So I have Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility appointed Member Martinez to represent them.
Now, they didn't have to appoint a member from Reno.
No, they did not. They just had to appoint someone from that
So it's
represented.
coincidental in this
Yes.
case. I mean, they both could have been up for appointment.
Correct.
But he's already been appointed, and if that changes, so let's say I think it swaps back and forth, right, amongst the other jurisdictions of who is appointed from the regional wastewater, then we'd have other openings, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And this is just to fill the vacancy until March 31st. Next month, we will return with everyone's reappointments for discussion to represent TMWA on the Western Regional Water Commission.
Okay, great. Good to know. Okay. So I'm looking for a motion to appoint Ms. Taylor to the Western Regional Water Commission to fill Ms. Breckis's term.
Yes.
Okay, and so we have a motion from Ms. Andriola, second from Mr. Martinez. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, we'll
Thank
turn our
you.
attention to item 13, the general manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we have some homework, or maybe a gift, you could call it, from us to the TMWA board. So Mark Milan, who many of you know, who's kind of championed our public outreach for indirect potable reuse in the American Flat Project, gave me a book called Purified. And it just talks, it's a very good book that summarizes all of the direct or the indirect potable reuse projects across the country, and some of them even direct, and just sort of talks about the pitfalls, the things they did right, the things they did wrong. But I thought the board would appreciate it as we go forward with American Flat, closer and closer on that project. And it's not a book you have to read all in one sitting. There's a pretty good summary of each project that, you can read them 15 minutes at a piece. So we have that for you. Sonia will also start scheduling lunches with me and individual board members just to walk through and see if you have any questions for me or specific topics about TMWA. And lastly, talking about the LA fires, our thoughts and prayers are with everyone involved, especially for those water utility, our brothers and sisters down there that are working tirelessly to keep the water on. And so our thoughts are with them. And it also highlights, one thing we didn't talk about was just the important work that Cara Steelen is doing with upstream watershed protection. That's not to protect houses and homes, but that's to protect our water quality from the effects of those types of wildfires. And then also, and Danny and Will touched on this, but we have been and are continuing to work closely with NV Energy and all of the fire departments on emergency management, helping them understand our system. So when the firefighters are pulling from hydrants, they understand the impacts to TMWA. And I think most importantly too, just establishing those contacts and relationships with the folks in our operations center and the firefighters on the ground. And then lastly, it's also just testament, I talked about it with the Davis fire when we didn't lose pressure in the system. It's a testament to all the employees out there for TMWA, who just are incredibly dedicated, experienced, hardworking for this community. And lastly, contrary to what Will Raymond said, he is fun to be around most of the time, even in the summer. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Very well said. And I think the whole entire board echoes your comments about the LA fires and our hardworking staff. I mean, it goes without saying, but it does need to be said. You all need to know how much we appreciate the work that you do and the professionalism that you bring. The very fact that we haven't experienced these kind of pressure changes, it's a testament to the work you're doing. And it means you're right on the spot. And I know also there was a lot of effort in the Davis fire running around, delivering generators where there were none, and making sure that the system stayed coherent and operational. And it does not go missed by us. Very, very important that we represent well. So thank you for those comments very much. Really appreciate it. Let me then turn to general public comment. Any, Ms.
May I
Folsom?
ask a
We,
question during-
absolutely. Do you want something for John?
Yeah, actually, it was under the report, John, talking about water production. And I was wondering if nothing else for the new board members, but I would like to hear as well. So it's talking where you're talking about the aquifer recharge. If you could explain that process just briefly, as well as how and where it's done. It was talking about being 1 million gallons per day of recharge. So if you guys could just touch on that briefly.
Yeah, I think at a future agenda item, and we usually try to come back with an aquifer storage and recovery update just on the numbers, and so we can bring that back to the board in the next few months.
Okay.
And then just in general, for the board's awareness for now, for new members, I mean, our aquifer storage and recovery program is very important. So that's taking, treated water from the Truckee River when it's available, usually fall, spring, and recharging our aquifers so that the groundwater levels are at healthy levels. So when we need them in a drought, we can draw from them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, great. And so we're back to public comment. Ms. Folsom? Okay. And then opening for board comments and requests for future agenda items. And I have one or two, but let me ask the board first. Does anyone have something you'd like to see appear on a future agenda item? This is how we got this item to talk about the pressure, is we asked for it. So is there anything of interest that you'd like to hear about? Or something controversial you'd like the staff to address? All right, well, seeing none from the board, I have two possible ones. In previous meetings, the staff have begun to update us on TMWA water use standards, and should the board have a role in prioritizing low water users or penalizing, I'll say, high water users. And this has been an ongoing discussion. And what I was going to ask for is an update at a future agenda on how that analysis is going and where we are. Have we stopped or are we moving forward? We haven't had a board discussion about it except to be introduced to the idea, as I recall. And you got some general feedback from us on if that was a good idea. But I would love to hear an update. I don't think we've talked about it for at least 6 months. Is that something we could?
Yes.
Reasonable? Okay. The other one is, I know that you, Mr. Zimmerman, myself, and Ms. Hill have been working with the River Oak group on potentially having them become a TMWA member, just as we've merged other private water systems and public water systems in with TMWA. And so I think at some point in the next 3 meetings, let's say, we'd love to hear an update on where they stand. I know that they were waiting for certain documents and the PUC's involved, and they were waiting for certain engineering reports, and it all seems to be dragging out a bit, and I'm sure that those residents are wanting some certainty about whether they're going to have a future water system.
Yeah, we'll bring that back, and it's part of our goals to, with any potential acquisition of a water entity, to bring it back to the board for an update, so we can do that.
Okay.
When we have enough information, when there's enough, I guess,
Right.
progress in that
Right.
Water system where we can
Okay.
report something to the board.
All right. Well, going once, going twice, future agenda items, maybe as we all get our feet under us, we will, these things will keep popping up. So I'm going to. Book club. Okay. Try to read one chapter of this book before the next meeting. Okay. And there will be no quiz, but I know some of you are going to see some of these systems go to a reuse conference in Florida. And I think, Mr. Anderson, are you going to? Yes. And then Ms. Andriola, you're going. I had hoped to go, but I don't think I'll be able to go. But anyway, so I'm very impressed that our board members keep getting educated. So I want to invite our new board members as well to feel free to, as these conference opportunities come up, to get more educated, take advantage of those. All right. Well, with that, we're now at adjournment, and I don't think we need a motion, right? Okay. So seeing no more comments, I will declare us adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for being here.